Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming to our town hall tonight. This is our April town hall for Fair Districts, Georgia, and we're going to be talking tonight about some of our legislative activities. Um, just a few housekeeping notes here. Um, the if you signed in with under the name iPhone or something like that, I see a couple. If you could please uh, change your name in the system to be an actual name, so we can call on you by name or refer to you by name. Um, um, and if I could make a request to, is it Mr. High? Um, yes, I see you have Mr. High.
Yes.
Welcome. Yeah, I see you have a background that is a campaign background. And as a nonpartisan group, I'd ask you to not display that during our town hall if you wouldn't mind.
I know I wouldn't mind. I just don't know how.
Okay. Yeah,
Let me do
this,
this. Let me do this. I just take the video off.
okay. This is the first time we've ever had to make that request, and we're glad that you've stepped up to run. This is just not the right forum to display that, but we appreciate your stepping up. Um, so again, what we'd like to do start is just ask folks to place in the chat, just tell us where you came from tonight, where you are in the state of Georgia or elsewhere. And just I'll start. I'm in Alpharetta. I'm just going to say Ken in Alpharetta. But if you could just make a note in our chat room and let us know where you are chiming in from, that would be great. And we'll get to know you all. Caroline from Athens, that's wonderful. We usually get a pretty good across the strait. So John from Darien, that's down the coast. John, Jack from Decatur, welcome, Jack. Thank you for joining. Roswell, Savannah. Okay, the coast is winning so far. Becky from Atlanta. Hey, Becky. And Pooler, Stone Mountain. All right, cool. Uh, we have a pretty interesting program tonight, and we're going to be talking about not only tonight, but our next town hall, which is going to occur in May. We'll be talking about that one a little bit too. Uh, Let me just catch up here. Sumter County, Lawrenceville, Gwinnett. Mr. High, thank you. East Atlanta. Julie Boland, good to see you again, Julie, from Marietta. Margaret from Decatur, but you're in Massachusetts. So we're covering the country tonight. This is really cool. And actually, Dave, aren't you calling in from Louisiana tonight too? I think you are.
That's true. I guess for truthfulness, I should have put in New Orleans.
That's okay. We know you're a Stone Mountain guy, but you're originally from New Orleans and visiting, so that's cool. Um, so thank you, welcome for joining. We're gonna let the rest of the folks check in here. We had about over 80 registrants for tonight's town hall. We typically do get many people who had registered earlier and decided not to show, which is not good. But we hope to get a good number more than we have already. How many are we at so far here, Beth? I don't see the numbers here.
About 22, 23.
Oh, we're getting there. And I'll just repeat my request for those who are joining. Please pipe into the chat, and in the chat, let us know. Let us know where you're coming from. I have an email request for somebody to send the invitation to. Let me handle that request here. One moment. How do I find the Zoom link, Beth? Let me see.
I sent an email out. It would have gone to you, Ken, and it had
Oh,
a link just in it. And I sent it
perfect.
about
One second.
6:30.
Yeah. A link from Beth. Let me do it this way. Select that person. Okay, very good. All right, let me get back to the Zoom. Tracy from Conyers, welcome. Thank you for joining. I think in just a minute or so, we're going to start the program here. As you join, please, again, let us know where you're coming from. I have a particular interest if anyone's from Augusta tonight, because we have an event coming up that we'll talk about later in the evening. about Augusta. So if anybody is in the Augusta area, general Augusta area, and would like to be part of that, uh, please chime in with a chat. You can send me a private message in the chat. We'll talk about that a little bit. So appreciate everybody coming. Gainesville, hey, well, welcome from Gainesville. So I think we're going to go ahead and start the program tonight, and I'll start sharing my screen and introduce the speakers for tonight. Let me do that. 1 second here. Uh, and just verify that you can see my screen. Are we okay seeing the screen? Good. Excellent. Continue to share. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Okay. So again, welcome to our town hall this evening, and it's been a while since we talked about our legislative priorities. So we wanted to tonight regroup a little bit and talk about what it is we are asking the legislature to do. And we've got three active items down at the legislature that have been active in prior sessions, plus a new one. We're going to talk about what those legislative priorities are. We're going to cover the actual bills themselves, what we're asking to be changed. We'll recap just briefly the lobbying effort that occurred in the just recently ended session. And so that's kind of a bit of education for you all, you folks, on what exactly are we trying to get done here from a legislative perspective. We know that there's a lot of education and research and so on that leads to these questions, to these matters. But what we'd like to do is just regroup everybody, recap kind of what our agenda is. Um, we'll then go to what can you do now? There are actions you can take now to be involved with our program and our initiative, and we'll have a page on that. Then we're going to do a preview of coming attractions. And as I mentioned, there's a May town hall that you're going to be really interested in. We're going to let you have we're going to have you sign up tonight if you're interested. We will then go to Q&A. So while we're doing the Q&A, please add your questions to the chat as we go throughout the program. If you have any questions at all, put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. Let me introduce tonight's speaker, Mr. Dave Thomas. Dave has been with our group for over a year now, and he is taking on a leadership role for us now as the new leader of the Legislative Advocacy Committee. That means his team will be directing all of our work in terms of lobbying at the Capitol, grassroots lobbying, anything that involves advocating either directly or indirectly to legislators about trying to make change. That's Dave's mission. And we thank you, Dave, very much for signing up for that and volunteering for that mission. He and his wife, Joyce Thomas, is also with us tonight, led the effort to create our lobby day at the Capitol. We'll be recapping what happened there tonight. He has an email, advocates at fairdistrictsga.org. That's a new email for those of you who are been with us before. It's a new email specifically directed to the advocacy work that are under Dave and Joyce's leadership. So Dave, welcome and thank you. I'm going to turn the program now over to Dave, and he's going to take you through the rest of the material. So again, thank you all for coming, and please feel free to pipe into the chat and tell us where you have come from, if you've come. And again, we'll be looking for your questions. So Dave, take it away, sir.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate the introduction. Um, many of you may not have seen my face or heard my voice before. That's because I'm a relative newbie, as Ken pointed out. New to Georgia. Joyce and I have been here only about 2.5 years, and the first exposure to Fair District, Georgia was last year, last legislative session. I think Lobby Day was the first thing we did. And I liked the organization. I was impressed with the organization. I was impressed with the mission. I think getting redistricting right is critical to our voting process. And so I'm definitely on board for this. And it's a privilege actually to be able to talk to y'all and be a leading player in the advocacy group. I'm particularly interested in advocacy because the legislature is the knothole that we have to go through to get most of this stuff accomplished. And Joyce and I live in Metro Atlanta, so we have access to the Capitol. It's close enough that we can get into it. And I don't mind talking to legislators. So it seems like a natural fit, and I'm really looking to become even more engaged as we move forward. Okay, so my job tonight is sort of to recap the legislative session with regards to fair districts. And so there's 5 things I want you to make sure you leave with tonight. One of them is understanding the bills that were dropped that are related to our work. Understand how those bills relate to the objectives of the group. Understand the lobbying we did. Understand the fate of the bills, and understand the learnings that we got from this session that we're probably going to use to guide us going forward. So the place to start for this is with what I've called the 5 objectives for redistricting reform. And this version of them came right off the pledge form. For those of you that don't know, there is a pledge that we ask legislators and candidates to take, which I think Ken's going to talk about some more near the end. And so these are more or less lifted right from that. And you can read yourself, and I'll go through them quickly. It's basically a transparent districting process, fair maps that represent Georgia's communities, diversity, and not favoring one party over another, and competitive districts that give voters meaningful candidate choices. The competitive districts is a big part of what we're trying to do. And an end to 2 things, mid-cycle redistricting and prison gerrymandering. Prison gerrymandering is the explanation for that is that prisoners get counted in the districts that they're imprisoned in. So it affects only some districts, but it can be a fairly significant effect in those districts. So let's move on, Ken. So what I've done here is try to give a correlation between the 5 objectives and the bills that were actually in the session. There were a total of 5 bills, but it's really 2 pairs and 1 Senate bill alone. The transparent redistricting was covered in HR 1105 and SR 58 as part of a request for an independent citizens commission. And there was also a separate bill, SB 114, that was focused specifically on the transparency. The request for the Independent Citizens Commission also covered the issue of the fair district maps for meaningful candidate choices. And then on the end to mid-cycle redistricting, we had another pair of bills, House Resolution 1030 and Senate Resolution 558. And we did not have any submission for the end to prison gerrymandering, at least not in this session. Part of the reason for that is that it's a relatively localized effect, and we thought some of the other ones were more important to concentrate on. And in particular, we spent most of our energy on the end to mid-cycle redistricting. That's the one I bolded here on this slide. That is particularly relevant right now because of all the craziness that's going in the redistricting war. We would like to essentially make sure that any redistricting that is done in the year after the census occurs. And just to highlight how relevant it is, today, Virginia is voting on whether or not they're going to go through a highly partisan gerrymandering. And I have not been paying enough attention to know how the voting went on that. It may be if their polls close at 7 o'clock, all that data's in already. So let's talk about what these bills are. The Independent Citizens Commission has a lot of components to it. And the idea is that it's an independent, nonpartisan commission. instead of the General Assembly doing the redistricting. And if we do a comparison of how that would change, right now the existing situation is that the redistricting process is completely controlled by the Georgia Assembly. And the bill that was filed would change it to something that was controlled by an independent citizens commission that is completely staffed by citizens. We'll talk a little bit more about where the qualifications come from, but it is not legislators that are doing this. And I think this one is important because it's kind of a slam dunk if you think about the process. We think of an independent citizens commission as kind of a little exotic right now because mostly the process is legislatures deciding how to redistrict. And that's kind of odd in the sense that my analogy is it's as if I went and interviewed for a job and I got to tell my prospective employer the process that we were going to use to decide whether or not I was going to get hired. There's a transition from let's go back. Yeah, let's go back. That's right. There are very few firm legal standards guiding the situation right now. It's specifically only two. They have to be contiguous districts, and they basically have to be in compliance with the law. And the proposed bill would change a lot of those guidelines into actually firm legal standards. They could be drawn to favor parties and protect incumbents. The commission will be strictly nonpartisan. And there's relatively limited public input or involvement in the process right now. And part of the change that we would like to see is to make it extremely transparent, publicly visible process at all steps. This is before the maps come out, once the proposed maps are there, and during the actual approval process. Okay, now we can move on, Ken. So when we say a citizens commission, it's open to all Georgia voters. There is a selection process that's overseen by the Chief Justice. There's a recommendation for representation for both the major political parties plus independents. Have to have some track record of being a registered voter and voting participation. And there are prescriptions about some of the people that cannot be on the committee or the commission. And it's mostly people that are basically involved in the legislative process. So let's explore some of the more detailed changes now that we would be looking for. The two legal standards that the commission has to, or the process has to follow right now are comply with the Voting Rights Act and contiguous districts. And so some of the fascinating thing about this to me is if you reflect on the things that are not covered here, that may be covered by guidelines, but are not actually legally mandated. So for the one that stands out to me is equal population size, for example, is not a legal requirement for redistricting right now. Now, generally, they try to honor that, but there is no legal requirement right now to do that. And we talk now about packing problems with redistricting. The ultimate example of packing would be if you did not have to honor consistent population levels in each of the districts, it could cause so many problems. So that is one of the things that is actually going to be converted to a legal standard, equal population size. And let's look at the two things that I highlighted that are going to be converted to legal standards: the equal population size and a respect for precinct boundaries. And then conditionally, there's a requirement that county boundaries get respected too. The reason I say conditional is because it's in there with the caveat that if this conflicts with some of the other priority requirements, then you can break this requirement. And there are some new standards that are also put in. Explicitly protect minority participation, not favor a political party, incumbency, or other person or group, not use existing maps as a basis, and not consider political data, election results, or the address of the incumbents. And there are other standards, but to me, these are the ones that stand out. Transparency is also built into this independent commission bill. And transparency means many things. It's basically enough access to information about the process and the plan, or plans, as the case may be, so that people can meaningfully participate in the process. So that requires at least one public hearing in each congressional district, an internet portal that will allow an opportunity to comment or submit alternative maps. All the data used has to be available on the portal, and all meetings and discussions are public, meaning they can't be a private or meeting or conversation where the decisions are made that the public do not have access to. And notification is part of that. Any meetings, they have to be posted 14 days in advance, and the commission may not contact outside groups. And this is according to the bill that was filed. There is actually a surprising history for independent commissions in Georgia, or at least proposals for independent commissions. This is not a new or really exotic thing, at least as far as the Georgia legislature is concerned. It goes back all the way to 2004, when the U.S. Supreme Court ordered new maps replacing the existing maps. And that was because of a 2002 gerrymander done by the Democrats. So through 2005, 2006, there were new maps enacted, and parenthetically, these were mid-cycle maps. And Governor Perdue ordered an independent task force on redistricting, and they came back with a recommendation that said we should have an independent commission. So this is as far back as 2005 and 2006. The recommendation for an independent commission then is 2 decades old, and it came from a commission that was ordered by a Republican governor. So the Republicans introduced a constitutional amendment for the redistricting commission, but the final approval for the map still has to go through the General Assembly. And then from 2008 through 2025, the Democrats introduced constitutional amendments for independent redistricting commission. And it happens in every session. So this has been going on basically for 2 decades, and it was kicked off by the Republicans. This is not strictly a Democratic activity. No independent commission resolution made it out of committee, and most of them never got heard. So let's look at what the process should look like based on our recommendation for the mid-decade redistricting ban. Sorry. This is SR 558 and HR 1033. And what we would like to happen is that
hush up, you guys.
what we would like to happen is census occurs in the decade years, in the following one. So for this example, the 2020 census, 2021, the redistricting occurs, and then that is used in the subsequent 5 major elections. So 22, 24, 26, 28, 2030, another census is done. And then with the new data, we can go through redistricting again. So I also want to mention the SB 114, the Transparency Act. The transparency requirements were also included in the Independent Commission bill or Independent Commission resolution. They were offered up as a separate bill for this session because if they're included as part of the resolution, because that requires constitutional change, that's a big hill to climb. It has to go through the amendment process. But that portion of the Independent Commission bill does not actually require a constitutional amendment. So it was pulled out and separately offered as a bill, SB 114. But essentially, the data on the construction of the bill is the same as what's in the SR 558 bill. So this is my take of, if you read the Transparency Act, it's a lot of prescriptive stuff. Shall do this, shall do that, timing, access, level of detail. And it's easy to get lost in the weeds. The purpose of the Transparency Act is to ensure that the plans and process for redistricting are available to constituents through all of the major stages. So this means before any plans are done, they need to have a chance to do some input. Once the plans are produced, plans are produced, they have to have access to them so that they can offer informed opinions. And the bill is requesting a granularity level small enough that the comments could affect all the way down to the residence level. So that kind of detail. And also ensure access to the staff and legislators responsible for the process. So what I mean by that is at the meetings where the stuff is reviewed, you have to have people that actually will be deciding on these plans or a part of the process of creating these plans so they can be interrogated or they can receive the comments from the citizens. One of the elements of this is the public hearing schedules. It mandated 2 public hearings in each judicial district, one prior to the development of the plan, one after the introduction of the plan, and at least one in the first and second largest municipalities in the judicial districts. And then there's requirements for representation and public access. We can go to the next one, Ken. So representatives from both parties and committee members would be at these hearings. They would be accessible on the internet, both live and by recording. They're available for what I described as the detailed inspection. That's the specificity down to the residence level. All the meetings on the plan are open to the public. Also, it would require an explanation of the factors that were considered in the creation of the plan. So essentially, the deliberation would have to be exposed in the hearings. And then access to all the documented communication during the process. So emails or any communication that was back and forth that was outside of the context of the meeting, citizens would have to have access to. And there's also a requirement of notifications to make sure it's not just that this stuff occurs and is accessible, but that people get notified so they'll know about it. Let's go to the next slide for that. So there has to be hearing notifications on the Assembly website and in local legal organs. So whatever the publications are that are being used in local areas would have to have notifications. The notice of the plans has to be out shortly after its assignment to the committee. In the bill, it was 48 hours. So it's within 2 days, basically. And any votes have to be preceded by 2 weeks of notification. So it's not just the plans themselves and access to the process, it's also making sure the notifications are out there so people are aware that they can participate in this process. All right, so those are the bills. This is how the legislative session went for all of the bills we're interested in. All of the bills got a committee referral, meaning they at least made it into a committee. Our lobbying was concentrated on the mid-cycle redistricting, and none of them got a hearing. And we'll talk some about why that was. The lobbying I want to explore a little bit more. What we mean by lobbying was that we had, so the main event we did was Lobby Day, where we invited a number of people to join us and participate. I think we had maybe a dozen and a half. And it was a fairly interesting sample of people. We had at least one political candidate. There were some young people. There were some people who hadn't done it before with us. And we had some veterans. And that included the rope line, office visits, talking to legislators, talking to staff. And the staff actually were good sources of a lot of useful information, by the way. It was also Lobby Day was preceded by some presence in the Capitol. I was down there for several days. I can't remember exactly how many before Lobby Day. I think Ken might have been down there too. And then there was actually a lot of follow-up afterwards. Ken was there. Julia spent a lot of time, a lot of visits, getting to legislators to talk to them. None of it made any difference, at least as far as getting a hearing. And the bottlenecks were really the committee chairs. So we can kind of give you some insight as to what happened there. The House committee chair is Rob Leverett. And I would describe his response as no, as far as the hearing is concerned, but meaning he was not completely closed off. But when we left the office, it was a no. There was a long discussion, a fairly involved discussion. I think what it boiled down to is he was not really interested in putting any more restrictions on the power or the discretion of the legislators, specifically with respect to redistricting, and maybe it was a broader philosophical position too. He did say, though, he is not personally a proponent of mid-cycle redistricting. He's not a big fan and was not looking forward to doing that. He just did not want to put handcuffs on the legislators. And the good tone of the conversation that we had with him, it was both Ken and I were in there, and Ken did most of the talking. He appeared to give us a fair hearing. He not only listened, but I think he kind of received the information and the position that we had, and just in the end decided he wasn't ready to give us a hearing on the bill. With Hodges, it was a somewhat different, I don't know, experience, in that it just felt like it was a hard no as far as the hearing was concerned. Again, in this case, Ken and I went together. Ken did most of the talking, and I would say he did excellent job, as good as I've seen one of these conversations go. Laid out the case very well. And when we got objections from Hodges, he responded to each of them very effectively, but it just felt like the no was there even before we walked in the door. Some of the reasons, I think the more significant reasons we were given for the no was the uncertainty with pending court cases, specifically the Supreme Court case on Calais. Also, he cited the fact that it's an election year. Um, Basically, I think it was nobody wanted to put their head up on an issue that might be potentially controversial. And then he specifically cited he thought there were bigger priorities right now, mostly around economic and financial issues. Um, Basically, he was hearing more about money from his constituents. And he said because of that, the legislative calendar was basically full. And the not hearing from constituents on redistricting issues was also a big one for him, especially when he compared it to all the economic stuff he was hearing. Lots of people talking to him about that and nobody talking to him about redistricting. There was also a discussion that Ken had later with the minority whip, Sam Park. It was after crossover day. I think that's right. And he was very supportive. He was all in on redistricting reform. He's specifically very concerned about what's going to happen post-Calais. And his specific suggestion about how to, or tactics to use, I guess you'd call them, we should concentrate on the most vulnerable Republican candidates to generate support. Specifically because all of these bills that we got submitted would be identified as partisan bills. All the sponsors were Democrats, and there were no Republican sponsors on any of them. And we need to find Republican sponsors. And he said generally there needs to be public pressure. It can't be silence out there. There needs to be public pressure, phone calls, visits, other communication just to the legislators telling them as citizens we're interested. And he did offer to help strategize. So the main conclusions we came from all this experience was that we have to have Republican support for any legislation to move forward. It's not going to go anywhere, or very unlikely to go anywhere without getting some Republicans on board. And we need constituent contact for the legislators. And I say possibly in an overwhelming amount. And some of this insight actually came from legislative staff. We had some interesting, really good conversations with some of the legislative staff. One of the offices, the legislative assistant said, it may take as many as 50 to 100 phone calls or pieces of communication to get the attention of her boss. And she said specifically, she had an instruction that she didn't really have to bring it to her boss unless, say, 10 phone calls came in. So that's kind of giving you a calibration on how much they need to hear about this to make it an issue. I think we're going to turn it back to Ken now, but I'll be back for any Q&A.
Dave, thanks. That's a great summary of just a lot of stuff that's been going on down at the legislature. So really good stuff. And again, if you've got any questions so far, please put those in the chat. I'm going to ask Beth Stevenson to take a look at the chat if she can, while I am presenting these next couple slides before we get to the Q&A. So today's point, we need to be applying more public. What can we do is the question. What can you do now to start engaging with legislators in this process? Well, the number one action, of course, is to vote in the primary election. I think you're all aware of it. Early voting starts in about a week, goes through May 16th. Of course, election day, May 19th. Your vote is a key voice here, absolutely key voice. But there's also a big opportunity during this election cycle, even now before the primary, but and it'll be also after the primaries. Tell your candidates you want this. I have to tell you that not a day goes by that I don't get invited to a meet and greet on for candidates in my area. They're out there wanting to meet people. They want to talk to people. I get invited to them all the time. I probably have two or three on my calendar for the next week. when I go there, I'm talking about redistricting, okay? Because that's my pet issue, but I know how important it is, and so I speak to any candidate I can get in front of, meet and greet, short casual conversation. I tell them what I do, and I tell them why this is so important to me, and I think it's important to the state as well, right? And so you have an opportunity now to talk to candidates. And there's a wealth of information on our website about the polling information, and you can use this information about the proposals that are on the table to talk to your candidates about what you want done. And we're going to be asking you to solicit pledges from candidates through November election day. What happens is we go through this every 2 years. Um, After the primary, we will start a formal pledge campaign. We have a number of legislators, sitting legislators who've already pledged, and their names will be on our website. We have to update our website to have that information refreshed, but they will be on the website. And then we will have a list of all the candidates out there as well. And those who have pledged, we will have their names on the website, right? Um, so we're going to be asking you to go to your candidates and solicit pledges. And the pledge is pretty darn simple. That's that one sheet of paper, but there's also an electronic way that they can pledge. And we'll get all that information to you probably later in May once the primary election day is passed, because we don't worry about it until after the general election. The two final candidates are in place. That's when we try to do that. Okay. And so that's a key thing that you'll be able to do. You can start talking to folks now, and then at some point, when you figure out who wins your district, who's on the general election ballot, we will be asking you to solicit pledges. So keep in mind there'll be an action for you to take, and that's a very powerful action. I will say that in the 2024 cycle, I should say, I think we actually had a candidate in about one-third of the assembly districts who were on board with us. So that's not a bad number, but we'd like to see that be more like 80%. We reach high here, right? The other thing is you can become a local champion. We're just starting a process to get involved in a community level with redistricting. And we would like you to, if you're interested in that, to email Dave's email, advocates@fairdistrictsga.org. That's a way for you to say, I want to help do this in my local area. I can host meetings, I can reach out to folks, I can organize a small group of people to help do the pledging and so on. So we're looking for people to become local champions in your community. And if you're willing to do that, please send us an email, advocates@fairdistrictsga.org, and we will get back to you. Now, just as a reminder, we are a nonpartisan organization. We do not support candidates. We do not campaign. The only thing we do related to the election is to ask for them, the candidates, to pledge. It's kind of a one-way request, right? The only thing we will do is we will post on our website who has pledged as an informational folks things to voters, and we will post a thank you picture of that candidate with their pledge if they in fact sign the pledge. But that's as far as we can go. But you as a voter can be as political as you want to be. You simply say, this is important to me, and this is what I want you to do and why I want you to do it, right? And so you can decide, your voting preference. This could be one of the elements you take into account as voting. Frederick, however, just doesn't get involved in campaigning or candidates directly as an organization. Preview of coming attractions. First of all, there's an event in Augusta on April 25th. That's this Saturday. We are currently seeking a local champion who lives in the Augusta area. If you happen to be on the meeting tonight, if you happen to be here, and I haven't had a chance to see where everybody's from, but if you happen to be from Augusta, we're actually looking for a one person to step up and become a local champion for us. If you would do us a favor, and if you're willing to at least inquire about this opportunity, please send that email to advocates@fairdistrictsga.org. I sent an email about a week ago, maybe a little less than a week ago, to about a dozen people from our mailing list who are from Augusta. I don't know if any of you are here tonight because I haven't correlated the attendee list against that. You should have gotten an email from another Fair Districts account explaining what we're trying to do in Augusta starting in April. And it's going to be a series of events that are organized locally, some of which are going to be related to mapping. And so we'd like to have a local champion in the Augusta area. We will also be trying to do this elsewhere, but right now we're starting in Augusta. May 21, we are going to release a new redistricting poll. We have conducted the poll. We are absorbing the results right now. We're collating the answers. We're going to release that new poll on May 21. There's going to be a town hall that you're going to be able to register for in just a second. That's going to be very interesting data. It's going to give us an update from a poll we took 4 years ago, and it should indicate how strong the position is in terms of what voters want on redistricting. You're going to be armed with that information when you go out to talk to candidates starting on May 21st. So you'll have fresh data to put in front of them. And I think candidates do pay attention. When you say, I'm speaking for 5 million Georgia voters, we know what voters in this state want. Some of the, I'm not going to tip our hand as far as what those results say, but I think you'll find there's a very compelling reason why redistricting reform should be an issue in this election. Around mid-June, we will then launch a pledge campaign. We'll get back to you through email. I'm not sure if we're going to hold a town hall on that, but we'll figure that out. Uh, Late June, early July, a very important event. The U.S. Supreme Court is going to issue this decision on the Voting Rights Act. It's called the Calais decision from Louisiana. That's going to be a major decision affecting how the Voting Rights Act weighs in. It's specific to redistricting. We will have a town hall in late August, most likely early September, to discuss that decision. We're going to bring in some experts to talk about what does this mean as far as our work advocating for districting if the law changes, and we strongly suspect it's going to change somewhat significantly, but we're not going to guess what the court's going to do. We'll have to wait and see what they do. But it's looking like they took this case specifically to set a precedent around this particular space. So it's sort of an ominous sign, but we'll know in late June, early July. It's going to be one of those big decisions that we probably gets announced at the end of the term. I mentioned the town hall. You can register tonight. Registrations are now open for this town hall. It's there's a bit.ly link at the bottom, and that QR code. If you want to go ahead and scan that right now on your screen, that will take you to the registration page in Eventbrite, and you can get a head start and register for the next town hall. So I'm going to leave this slide up as we get into the Q&A for just a couple minutes. But please register for that town hall. I think you're going to be really interested to see what the poll data says now about redistricting in Georgia. This is our second statewide poll, and we're very excited to share the results. Okay. Um, I think with that, we're going to go to Q&A now, and I'm going to leave this slide up for just a minute. But Dave and I will take your questions. And Beth, have you gotten any questions from the chat?
Um, so I wanted to mention that I'd also put up some links to some information that may be valuable related to mid-cycle redistricting, and I think it might be helpful. Carolyn Aiken had a question about possible cover letter to send to representatives, some type of letter that she could send, for instance, to her legislators. Is there something like that, or
So if I understand the question, I'm going to stop the share for just a second. But if people want to write down that bit.ly link that's active now, let me just stop this so I can come back on screen. So if I understand the question, Beth, it is, could we supply some sort of a template letter, a cover letter, um, uh, so something they could approach their legislators with? Um, I think we could do that. I think it's a great question. I think it's a great question. Um, uh, you know what? We'll do it. We're just going to commit right here and now to getting like a simple one-page letter out or some kind of a thing that you can use to start the conversation with your legislator. You could hand it to them at a campaign event. You certainly are welcome to email to them. Obviously, you can get their email contacts from the legislative website, the Georgia legislative website. Um, in this campaign season, I don't think they're going to be paying much attention to their legislative email. I think the most effective thing is going to be get to an event in person. These folks are very approachable. They want to be out meeting voters. That's good news for us. We want to be out meeting them. So we will commit to you, to the requester, that we will get some sort of an introductory letter about redistricting reform and what we'd like you to do and consider. We'll get something done. Thanks for the suggestion.
In the absence of a letter, the pledge form might be a good place for people to start. That's essentially a request
Yeah,
from
and we
maybe like
also
from the legislators.
Yeah, you know what? We also have on our website a two-page summary of who we are. Let's put a link into the chat if we can find. I'm going to pull that up on my screen here, and I'll put that in the chat. But there is a two-pager that's existing already that explains fair districts, what we're doing. So while we're taking more questions, I'm going to see if I can locate that piece of information. Yes, I
And
found the link. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. And I think this is actually a pretty good introduction. It doesn't take the form of a letter, but it's really like it's a handout you can print front and back. It's a PDF file that you can download and print yourself. And I would say let's start with that. Into the chat it goes here.
uh, there's a question for Dave, asking if he might talk a little bit about the difference between a resolution and a bill.
Sure. Basically, a resolution is the mechanism you use when a constitutional amendment is needed. So it's not just approval by the legislature, it also has to go before the voters to agree to it. The bill is doesn't require any constitutional change, and so it can just be passed in the legislative session.
Right, and I will say that the a constitutional amendment, you may or may not know in Georgia, folks, requires two-thirds of each chamber to pass it. Then it goes on the ballot. The governor does not get a say, no veto. So it's a voter. The voter gets the final say on that, but it is a high bar to get it out of the legislature, right? So if we can get things done in bills, it's in theory easier. But again, getting traction is our primary issue right now.
Um,
Right. But in either case, we got to get it out of committee.
Yes, into the committee, get a hearing. Once it's heard, then the committee can, yeah, there's a whole process we can go through, but if we can get a hearing, at least people have a chance to speak on that.
Leslie has a kind of a statement and I think a question about how to help amplify fair district messaging. She talks about the Unitarian Universalist Legislative Action Network, which is a coalition of Unitarian churches in Georgia, is eager to amplify fair district messaging through action alerts to their subscribers. And they'd be happy to share the poll and other, and I'm not sure CTAs when
Calls
needed.
to action, calls to
Calls
action.
to action, thank you very much.
Yep,
That's of course
yep,
what
yep,
that
yep.
is. Yes, so she's put her note in there, and so we'll take advantage of that. And I don't, maybe a question, but there may be others that want to say, provide some thoughts in terms of other groups that might amplify these messages.
Yeah, and as a comment to Leslie, thank you so much for that. I think that's super helpful. Our
Yep.
calls to action typically come through our email newsletter. I'm assuming, Leslie, that you are a subscriber to that. That's how you got here tonight, right? For sure, most likely. So we'll be issuing those. The pledge would be a great action to take once we have the primary done. And we'll be coming out with more information on the mechanics for how the pledge will be administered. That would be a super one to do as a start, in right after the primary is finished.
Um, Jack is asking if we've considered a response if the Cali decision effectively eliminates the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, Jack, a super great question. And it's the number one thing on our minds at the moment. We are formulating a plan. It'll depend on exactly how the court comes down on that decision. I've been thinking in the last couple of days about there are different degrees of restriction they could imply in that decision. I don't want to guess what they're going to say, but we absolutely are considering a response. I wish I could send a letter to the court. I have a new idea for them to consider, but I think it's above my pay grade and it's probably too late for that, right? But at the end of the day, we are absolutely considering what the response should be. We have to decide, even if the law says, let's just speculate, if they say, if the law says, well, you no longer have to comply with the Voting Rights Act, it doesn't mean that our principles have to change. Maps should reflect Georgia, right? So we have to figure out how do we effectively advocate for maps that reflect Georgia's demographics and political preferences. How do we do that? How do we measure that? I think there are doable things. What we might lose here is the protection of the law, which is not good, of course. And there's another consideration as part of that, Jack, is that if the court, does something that we don't like in the Calais decision, that will affect the appeal that the Georgia legislature has filed about the maps they were forced to redraw in 2023. That appeal would then get decided, and then there could be some action at the legislature, which we would not want to see, right? And so part of our consideration is not only what's our policy, what is our stance, but then how do we advocate for the legislator to hold the line and not do anything, I'll say, negatively impacting the maps that we're sitting in right now, right? So those are all things we are thinking about, Jack. It's going to be a subject for our board meeting. And when we have that town hall in August, we most likely will be communicating to you through our newsletter. We will do a town hall in August where we talk about the impact of that decision, and we will at that time reveal what we think our action plan is going forward. So it's a great question, and it's on the top of our list of things to try to figure out what to do. Thanks for the
I,
question.
I don't know. I don't know if we've completely handled the potential of the Calais decision, potential of the Supreme Court Calais decision. We've talked about a little bit, but just some of the background for people. Um, Louisiana has about a 30% Black population, and only had 1 out of 6 uh, um, districts for the House of Representatives. It was a majority Black district. So that got challenged, and they actually changed and made 2 out of the 6 districts a minority majority district. Then the change got challenged, and that's what's in front of the Supreme Court. And essentially the fear is that they're going to strike down the requirement for minority representation.
Right. And there are different ways the court could do that, and there's a soft way, there's a hard way. It just depends on how much the court wants to weigh into the procedures and the restrictions. Um, we'll have to see exactly how they word their decision, and we've got legal folks working with us to try to understand what the result of that is. But so anyway, uh,
There's another potential partner in the chat. Move to amend Atlanta.
yep, that's my friend Mark Harding, and thank you, Mark, for being here tonight. Another great political cause is Move to Amend. They are trying to undo Citizens United. I think everybody here knows what that means. But amending the U.S. Constitution to restrict to allow regulation of money in politics, another key thing that we need for democracy in the country. And Mark, thank you for that offer to be a coalition partner. And absolutely, we're totally with you. I think we're all in the same boat in terms of, to us, this is all part of an initiative called Free, Fair, and Secure Elections. Redistricting is part of that. All the voting rights issues are part of that. Money in politics is part of that. So I absolutely think there's an opportunity for cooperation along those lines. So thank you, Mark, for that offer, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Um, there are also some wonderful suggestions in the chat, which we will be um, documenting and keeping in the notes from this meeting related to outreach and such as letters to the editor, and also using language that we've got quite a lot of language on our website, the pledge form as we've talked about, and to develop pretty simple email templates. So thank you to folks that have been suggesting things. A lot of wonderful thoughts and energy.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to Carolyn Aiken's suggestion about the cover letter. And I'm going to suggest that rather than generating something new, Caroline, if you could look at the link I put in the chat, which is that PDF file in the chat, I think that probably has what you want. I would invite you to look at that and see if it's got what you need. If it doesn't, if you think something else is needed, send us an email and let us know, because I'd rather not recreate something. It's a really good intro to what we're doing, what our initiatives are, why this is important. So let's start with that, and then that's so I think we can fulfill your request. But if you do need something more in terms of reaching out to legislators, just let us know and we'll see what we can craft. Or you can use the language that's in that document and just craft a letter yourself. But I think that's a great intro template. Okay, I know it's at the top of the hour. I see Joyce has a couple of good suggestions in here. Inspirational films out there. Slay the Dragon, good one. Gosh, I don't have a catalog of films in my head at the moment. We should make one. Maybe we should make a film. I did shoot a video down in Statesboro at one time that's on our website about split cities, but that's small potatoes compared to what you want. Um, have we covered all the questions you think? Are we all set? Okay, what I'm going to do is just
I don't
pop up
see any
once
that we need.
again. I'm going to just pop up once again the QR code for the next town hall. We'll leave that up here as we're closing the meeting. Again, thank you all for participating. Thank you, Dave. Wonderful job tonight. And we look forward to continuing this journey towards free, fair, and secure elections, and fair maps is a key part of that. Thank you all for joining. And Beth, are you going to capture the chat then, information before you shut down?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Oops, I shouldn't have moved that thing out of the way.